Lots of people at URC Youth are passionate about making a positive change in the world. To start off URC Youth's Activism and Advocacy Month, we're going to be looking at the theory of change. The theory of change is a way of planning and evaluating a campaign that aims to bring about social change. It's often used by charities, NGOs, businesses and government sectors to structure their projects. Today I'm going to provide a brief introduction to the theory of change, but there will be some links below the video if you want to develop your knowledge further. So, the theory of change. The first thing that you have to consider when starting to campaign for change is what the big picture is. What is the overall change that you want to see? This might be, for example, ensuring that all women have a right to education, or ending food poverty, or ending the climate crisis. In this video, I'm going to use the example of the Ending the Climate Crisis. Last year, Christian Aid's Prophetic Activist Scheme ran a campaign focused on climate justice, and they used the theory of change, so we're going to follow that campaign as an example. So once you know what your long-term vision is, in this case ending the climate crisis, you can then consider what the smaller steps are that can lead to this overall change. This is where you consider what the problems are that contribute to the overall situation. So with climate crisis, there are many things that contribute to it, such as the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, or overconsumerism, to name but a few. These are still massive issues, but they're more specific than the overarching problem that you identified in the first step. You need to pick just one precondition in order to give your campaign focus. From this, you can then continue to narrow down your focus until you have a really specific issue to campaign on. The Christian Aid campaign was focused on the use of fossil fuels, but more specifically, it was concerned with the fact that the UK was investing billions of pounds in fossil fuel extraction overseas, which was in turn contributing to the climate change that affects the most vulnerable countries in the world. The focus of the campaign, therefore, was to end UK government investment in overseas fossil fuels projects. What you then have to do is to consider how you can bring about that change. Consider what the alternatives are to the current status quo and what sort of culture change would be needed to bring about your aim. When you're thinking about how to change the status quo, you need to think about who has the power to bring about that change. This might be world leaders and politicians, or CEOs, or even local businesses and local leaders. These are the people that your campaign needs to target because they have the power to change the current situation. Going back to the Christian Aid campaign, they identified that Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister was the person who would have the most influence in bringing about the change that we wanted. Now that you have a clear vision of what change you want to bring about and who can create that change, you can start identifying your goals and objectives for the campaign. You already have an overall goal, but this needs to be broken down into manageable chunks. Map out your campaign and what you want to achieve in the time that you have available. So you might identify what you want to have achieved in, say, 3 months, 6 months and 12 months. It might be that with one campaign, you want to have met with your local MP by 3 months and to have discussed the issues that you're concerned about with them. Then by 6 months, you might want the issue debated in Parliament, and by 12 months, you want a statement from government about what they're going to do. Your objectives, though, are always going to be individual to your particular campaign. Decide what progress will look like and work out the indicators that you're making progress. This will be your way of monitoring the effectiveness of your campaign. Now comes the fun bit. This is where you decide what actions you're going to take. This will tie in closely to what you've decided progress will look like. If you want your issue to be debated in Parliament, for example, you might launch a petition to the government and contact your MP to get the issue raised. You could also raise a stunt or protest to raise awareness, or you might run an information campaign. This is where you get to be creative, and this is the bit that activists generally really love. Whilst you enact your campaign, continue to evaluate how you're doing. You've already thought about your objectives and indicators, so every couple of months, schedule in a time to reassess where you are. You need to be constantly on your toes with activism, ready to adapt to any changes in the situation. With the campaign to divest from fossil fuels, there were several announcements throughout the year from the government, and they made indications that they were planning to end funding from fossil fuels. It wasn't until December 2020, though, that they finally actually made a commitment and said, yes, we are going to do this. Be willing to change your timeline to keep pressure on the people in power, and keep an eye on what's happening in case there are things that you could do differently to have a greater effect. And finally, never ever give up. Even if you get the change that you want, which is what we're all aiming for, continue to be active and to hold people in power accountable and to ensure that they do what they say they're going to do. This is the way that, slowly but surely, people can work together to bring about that blue sky thinking of the long-term vision. So, the long and the short of the theory of change is to identify the issues that you want to address and the ways that you can do this, to consider who can bring about the change, and then to find ways to influence them. As you're doing this, you set indicators and track your progress in order to keep your campaigning on track. Throughout the Activism and Advocacy Month, we're going to be looking at different methods of campaigning, such as letter writing and protesting, and then throughout the year, we'll be looking at specific issues. Have a look at the links in the comments for more information, and keep an eye out for more posts and events over the coming weeks.